Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hort Lighting version 2.1 application overview webinar. We're going to start in about a couple minutes to give a few more of our attendees time to join. Thank you for your patience. We'll start shortly. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being patient. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. As I stated, this is the horticulture lighting webinar for version 2.1. Well, we'll do a basic overview of the application process and some of the tools that are going to be available to support the submission of these version 2.1 products. Today's agenda, we'll do a quick overview of what's included in version 2.1. And then we'll go through the testing and reporting, application form changes, and QPL updates for the different categories that are now available in version 2.1, which include DC products, active cool products, and lamps. We'll also introduce some information related to version 2.1 regarding spectral tuning products. And then we'll move over to information on QPL filters, some of the fees and review times associated with these version 2.1 application, some information on delisting of products, and also some comments regarding brand name consistency. Following that, we'll go into a Q&A session. I'd like to introduce our team that we have today, which is myself, Bernadette Boudreau, and I'm the Associate Director of Operations here at the DLC. We also have my colleague, Aaron Feldman, who will also be presenting today, who's a Senior Technical Operations Analyst at the DLC. We have our support team here from the DLC and DNR who will be moderating the question and answer panel. Casey Holland, also from the DLC, which is a technical manager for the HORT program. And we have Dave Ryan and Maddie Sly, who are lead reviewers in the HORT program over at DNR. As far as webinar logistics, we want to remind you that these slides and this webinar is being recorded, and we will post this webinar to the Design Lights website shortly after today's presentation. All attendees will be muted, and please let me know or let any of us know if you are experiencing any technical issues in the chat feature, and we'll work to rectify those as soon as possible. As I stated before, we're going to leave 15 minutes at the end of the presentation to answer questions. But at any time, you can enter your questions in the question answer pane in GoToWebinar. Our support team, Casey, Dave, and Maddie, will actually answer these questions as they come up in the pane. And some of these questions we will read aloud to the entire audience at during our Q&A session as well. So let's go into a version 2.1 overview. A lot of the information that we're going to share today is similar to the information that Casey Holland presented in his overview of the HORT 2.1 requirements, but we're going to go into a little more detail. As you recall, version 2.1 builds upon our version 2.1 requirements. We want to remind you that version 2.0 will not necessarily be impacted by version 2.1. There will be no delisting impacts resulting from this release of version 2.1. HORT 2.1 products have been updated or are in the process of being updated to version 2.1 on the QPL after September 1st of 2021. Any HORT version 1.2 products will require an update to the version 2.0 or 2.1 requirements. What version 2.1 has done is added eligibility for DC and modular dynamically configurable systems, as well as externally supplied active cooled products. We also have added the category of LED lamps. We want to remind you, however, that even with this added eligibility, there are certain type of products that are not eligible with this version 2.1 update. You can see those non-eligible products listed here. Next slide. We also want to remind you that version 2.1 has been set up where we have made special considerations for all these new categories that are being implemented in version 2.1. You can find that information in the technical requirements where there are special sections for special considerations of things such as LED lamps and the DC cooled products, for example. We also want to remind you that a lot of the information on HORT 2.1 can be found on the DLC website under Horticulture Lighting, where you can select the HORT technical requirements version 2.1 to get the full download of the requirements. But a lot of the tools and application forms required for this submission are going to be located under the family grouping tab that I show pointed here. Please look at that information as you look to submit version 2.1 applications. So let's go into DC powered fixtures, which is one of the new categories with version 2.1. With DC powered fixtures, there are two types of powered fixture, DC powered fixtures that we have available for listing. They are modular fixtures and dynamically controlled fixtures. This is where one AC to DC power source supplies multiple fixtures. This power source that powers these fixtures may have a minimum and maximum number of fixtures that it may serve, that you will have to supply that information in your application form. This power source may be attached to one of the fixtures or located remotely from the fixtures. The power source marketed, as in, there must be a power source marketed as intended use for that specific model or group of models that you're submitting or family of products. The second type of fixture is products that operate on DC power. Now, what's a little different from these is these might not have a specific power source that's necessarily associated with these products. These fixtures may be wired to an AC to DC power source outside of a fixture in a separate room, or may be a part of an off-grid DC only horticulture fixtures. A AC or DC power source may or may not be marketed for this type of fixture. So that's what the main difference is. These type of fixtures may not have a power source that may be marketed with it. So let's talk about the testing and recording requirements for these DC products. We have two types of reports that are going to be required in place of our AC testing that we normally require on Hort products. We have the DC powered all-on photon flux test report, and we have the power test report. I'm going to go into more detail about these reports in future slides. But the DC powered all-on photon flux test report is an LS79 that requires all photon flux and power values for our verification in the application process. That must include information on the DC voltage, current, and power. We also have the power source test report, which is a tool that is available to be downloaded on our website. It is the performance table that describes the power source performance of the power sources marketed with the fixture. This information may come from benchtop testing or from specification sheet information from the power sources that are being aligned with these products. So a little more detail on this DC all-power photon test report. We talked about the fact that it must include all information, including DC voltage, current, and power. But one thing that we do want to point out is that although this information is evaluated for our technical requirements, for DC powered horticulture fixtures, the PPE threshold requirement must be met not only for the full power on test report, but also at the D rated values as well, the AC/DC rated values. So please keep that in mind when submitting these requirements to ensure that your DC, AC/DC D rated values also meet the PPE thresholds required in version 2.1. The power source test report, once again, is a tool that can be downloaded on the DLC website. It is a report per configuration at 2 different load points per input voltage. This is required for both types of DC power fixtures if a power source is offered for sale with that group of fixtures or model number. Some of the performance values that are required in that power source test report are consumed input power, power source DC output power max, and the min and max power within that fixture. Also, power factor and THD information is included in this report. This information is provided at 2 different cases: the maximum power load and a load point that is between the maximum power load and 20% of the maximum power. This will result in us identifying the worst case efficacy. And we'll show you in the next slide how the tool helps identify that very easily. Here is an example of a power source test report that has been filled out. As you see, you will enter the power source model number for the power sources that are configured with your products. Right now we show 2, but there is room for you to enter multiple model numbers there. You will enter this information, and what the tool will do based on these input is highlight in yellow what your worst case efficiency is. That information will be utilized to populate the row in orange, which is the power source loading percentage statement. This statement is generated from the information that you provide in this tool and will be utilized as a statement that we will publish on the QPL. So to ensure that these statements are consistent and that QPL users see this information in a consistent manner, we've developed this tool to make it easier to provide this information in a review and ensure that it's consistent when published. Okay, we'll go into some more reporting requirements for DC power fixtures. We also will be requiring some information on cabling loss examples, as we found that a lot of our manufacturing users of these type of fixtures want to see some information that relate to the cabling loss. And that essentially is reflected based on copper resistance values that are listed in the electrical code listed here. We have prepared a tool that will allow applicants to choose their own trade-offs or cabling gauge and length and provide an example of that provides a cabling loss statement that will be provided on the QPL for our users. And this information will be verified as far as what cabling you're selecting, and as far as whether your fixture is in parallel or series. Some of this information will be verified on the fixture specification sheet. Another reporting requirement is ISTMT testing on these power sources. Power source ISTMT reports are required for all horticultural products sold with an AC to DC and DC to DC power source. We need to make sure that you submit that information for all of your power sources, not just your primary. DC to DC power sources are required for any fixture level DC to DC power source. So please make sure when you submit this, to avoid any back and forth, that when you fill out those power source test report forms and identify those specific model numbers, you ensure that you have an associated ISTMT report with those model numbers. Here is an example of the cabling loss calculator tool, which is once again available for download on our Hort website or DLC website. As you see, you will enter information on the maximum number of fixtures you produce, your product wattage, your input voltage, and your power source maximum output wattage. You will also enter information on your wiring gauge and whether or not your product is wired in series or parallel. This will spit out an output of the required power supply, the required output of your power supply, which manufacturers can utilize to ensure that they have the correct power supply associated with this product. What it will also do is populate our cabling loss example statement, which will appear on the QPL. And once again, just like the previous tool, we have created this tool so that the statement is consistent across all products and utilize the inputs that you give us to populate a statement that will be published on the QPL consistently across all products that are DC. We do have a new application form for version 2.1, and that is once again available on the website. We have shown an example of some of the different fields that are included in this application form, such as now you have a requirement to select the input power type between AC and DC. Also, based on this AC or DC designation, there are some other new fields that are going to be required to be entered in this application form. Those include reported DC current and PPE, as well as photon efficacy, and also the derated PPE, photon efficacy, and input wattage that was mentioned earlier. There will also be some new fields on the QPL. I know that this is a slide that has a lot of information here, so I'm not going to read every field here, but there are going to be a lot of new fields or either redesignated fields on the QPL. Of course, there's going to be information that designates DC power products from DC products as far as input power type, and then some of the specific information regarding your DC products, such as PPE and the derated power inputs, will also appear on the QPL, along with some of those statements that I've mentioned that are produced in those tools. Fields currently used for AC input power input type, AC power input power, and PPE will not be populated for these products. The worst case values of THD and power factor will be shown in the same existing fields that you're used to seeing on the QPL currently. Okay, at this time, I'm going to move into externally supplied active cooled fixtures, and Aaron Feldman is going to take us through this content.
Thank you, Bernadette, and thanks for everyone who joined the webinar today. Like Bernadette mentioned, I'll be going through the externally supplied actively cooled submission process and some of the requirements for those types of fixtures. First, just to give an overview, these types of products use liquid, which flows through the input and output ports of the fixture. Products that use ducted forced air are not eligible in this policy, so we're only allowing liquid to be used for cooling. And then also just to note that fans are still eligible as they're internal to the fixture, and they're not the ducted forced air style. Another note is that externally supplied actively cooled fixtures, they must meet all of the requirements that were listed in version 2.0 and now version 2.1. But there are a few additional requirements for these specific types of products, which I'll go through in the following slides. On this slide, you can see some examples of the new metrics that are required on these types of fixtures. The liquid used to cool these fixtures may have specific solution types or concentrations. And so that must be documented in the submission process. And these limitations will be listed on the QPL to help stakeholders understand the system requirements for these types of fixtures. The next note here is flow rate, which is a metric that will be captured from the submitted test reports. Then there's the minimum and maximum inlet fluid temperature range. Those as well will be listed on the QPL. And additionally, there's a graphical representation of how the input power and ppf is impacted by the inlet fluid temperature, and that graph will be displayed on the QPL. There is a tool that we have developed to create this graph, which I'll go through in a little more detail in further slides. And then lastly, there's the self-protect cutoff temperature, and this is a temperature that once this limit is reached, the fixture will turn off. And this is a protection mechanism in case that the cooling system has some sort of malfunction or issue, so that the fixture will shut off and won't fail. As I mentioned, these types of products do have some more detailed testing requirements, and this slide gives some of those details. So for the ISTMT or thermal tests and the LM79 sphere and goniometer tests, water must be used as the fluid during these tests, even if there are other solutions applicable for this fixture. For the LM79 testing, the median inlet fluid temperature should be maintained. So this median temperature is based on the minimum and maximum inlet fluid temperatures that I mentioned on the previous slide, and the median between those two. And then lastly, for the thermal tests, the worst case inlet fluid temperature should be used. And then regarding those temperatures, the target temperatures, so that's the median temperature for the LM79, and then the worst case temperature for the ISTMTs, they must be within 2.5 degrees C of the target. Additionally, the LM79s must be conducted according to IES standards. We do understand that some of these products may require a little bit different testing procedure than typical horticultural products. So we will accept LM79 testing from goniometer types other than type C, but with that additional complication, we may request some additional information to confirm that the products were tested appropriately. In terms of the application form changes, this is a screenshot from the first tab of the application form Excel. And here's where you would select if your product has actively cooled functionality, and then also the subsequent information related to those types of products here. So that's being the solution concentration restrictions, and then the min and max inlet fluid temperature, as well as the self-protect cutoff temperature. This is a screenshot of the tool which will be used for the performance impact of inlet fluid temperature. So it creates a graph to show how fluid temperature impacts both input power and ppf. So in this tool on the left-hand side, you'll enter in the inlet fluid temperature in a maximum of 5 degrees C increments, from the minimum to the maximum inlet fluid temperature. And then after completing this tool, the whole Excel should be uploaded to the application portal, and then the graph will be taken and published to the QPL. In terms of the QPL listings, it'll display whether or not the product has an actively cooling presence or that externally supplied functionality. And then also it will include the tested performance based on the test report submitted. In addition, it will also include those that information that was supplied on the first tab of the application form, being the solution restrictions, the temperatures, min and max inlet temperatures, the self cutoff temperature, and the graph I was showing on an earlier slide. And then this is the last slide for externally supplied actively cooled fixtures. As Bernadette mentioned, if you have any questions on this, on these types of products in particular, feel free to enter them in the chat as we keep moving along, and we'll keep answering them in the chat. And now I will go through the LED replacement lamps. And this is another new type of product that has been introduced in HORT version 2.1. For linear replacement lamps in the HORT program, there's the types of products allowed are listed here for the fluorescent replacement lamps. So that's the 2-foot, 4-foot, and 8-foot T8 replacement lamps, and then also 4-foot T5 and T5HO replacement lamps. All those types are eligible for qualification. Any other fluorescent replacement lamps are not eligible. And then these products must meet all of the requirements listed in the version 2.0 and now version 2.1 requirements, with the exception of driver lifetime and a 5-year warranty. We'll go through those in particular in a few slides. And I also wanted to note that the requirements must be met on the bare lamp, and how we define it in the requirements is that it includes the effects of a external driver or ballast if applicable, but it is tested outside of a luminaire or retrofit kit. And then lastly, the one requirement that is not part of the standard horticultural products is that for linear fluorescent replacement lamps, they must have a beam angle greater than 140. For mogul-based HID replacement lamps or MOG-LEDs, E39 and E40 bases are eligible, as well as type B lamps, UL type B lamps only, which are powered directly by line voltage, and they bypass any ballasts from the existing fixture. And this is different than the linear fluorescent replacement lamps, where those types of products can be UL type A, B, C, or dual mode. For both linear replacement lamps and these MOG-LEDs, they must meet all the version 2.1 requirements, and they also, especially specific to MOG-LEDs, you also need to report the field angle in addition to beam angle. And then lastly, for the MOG-LED type products, you must report the intended mounting position, which is either horizontal, vertical, or universal. And that notes how the products are used, how they're designed to be mounted in a fixture. For example, if you're installing a product that's designed to be mounted vertically in a fixture where the base is horizontal, that would certainly prevent most of the light from getting out and cause some issues in the field. As I mentioned, the two changes from your typical horticultural fixture are driver lifetime and warranty. In terms of driver lifetime, since the AC input to the DC output to the LEDs is not typically conducted in a separate driver compared to horticultural fixtures. This requirement has been changed to a lamp lifetime for the lamp products. And this is based on a temperature point that must be listed on the specification sheet on the lamp housing. And the specification sheet must also have a note or a graph correlating the temperature at that point to a lifetime in hours. And then for qualification, that lifetime must be 50,000 hours at the maximum temperature allowed on the lamp. And this will be reviewed with the ISTMT testing. And then lastly, based on stakeholder engagement during the policy development cycle, the warranty for the lamps has been adjusted compared to horticultural fixtures from 5 years to 3 years. In terms of the application form and how to submit, there are a number of new properties specific for lamps. And on this slide, you can see there's the base type, the UL type, and then a few columns for the size information, as well as the intended mounting, which is for the MOG LEDs. And then also there are 2 columns for your reported beam angle and field angle. To go into a little more detail regarding the size properties for T-LEDs, it should be you should include the nominal length, which includes the pin bases in feet, as well as the diameter in inches. For MOG LEDs, you should include the length, and that length will actually be in feet. We'll change that for the slides once we put them on the web. And then height and width. Specifically for MOG LEDs, they may be in the kind of a corncob style, just like the image here, where the height and width will actually end up being the same value since it is a round fixture. Then in terms of the QPL listing, there's a new property that will be listed on the QPL called category, and that will indicate whether or not the product on the QPL is a horticultural lighting fixture or if it's a lamp. And if it is a lamp, it'll indicate which type, whether it's a linear replacement lamp or a screw-based replacement for HID, being omnidirectional, where the light exits the lamp in all directions, or it's a directional lamp where the light is primarily going in out of one plane of the lamp. Additionally, there's the base type, which are listed here, and then the product size information. Lastly, there's the UL type, whether it's type A, B, C, or dual mode for linear replacement lamps. And for HID, the only allowable type is type B. It'll also include the reported beam angle, the field angle, and then the intended mounting for the MOG LED products. And with that, I will pass it along to Bernadette to talk a little bit more about the QPL and the filters and display.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you so much. So as we've gone through this presentation, there are many new fields that are going to be available on the QPL. Next slide. And many of those filters are going to be available on our new QPL. Specifically, when you go into specific Hort products, for active cooled products, there will be a specific section or tab, as you see in the middle in the top graphic. There will be a section that has all the information available on any active cooled products. As Aaron stated before, as far as the performance impact of inlet fluid temperature graph, that graph will be displayed under the reported photometric performance tab for any product that you click into when searching on the QPL. You can select the print function in order to download these graphs and things of that nature, or print them if need be. Also in those sections will be the reported field angle and beam angle information for lamp type categories. As Aaron stated in his last slide, there are going to be a few different categories that are available, especially for lamps. And that information will be in the product categorization section. That will include the different categories, base types, and UL types that Aaron mentioned for the lamp categories. So please take a look at the QPL. Once again, a lot of the numerical information that is going to be published on the QPL does have filters available, and you will be able to select products based on the different category types that are available now on this QPL and with version 2.1. I also want to make a reminder about spectral tuning products. This is not really anything really new for version 2.1, but more of a clarification. So what we've done in this next slide is we've taken an excerpt from the actual version 2.1 technical requirements, which states for spectral tuning products, there must be a SQD for each channel. And for each of those SQDs that are supplied, those will be displayed on the QPL with the example shown to the right. So when submitting spectral tuning products, please ensure that you submit an SQD for each of your channel settings. And you can refer to the SQD section of our reporting requirements in the version 2.0 requirements in order to get more detail on that. Let's go into fees. One of the key things that are being changed with this version 2.1 product selection is the fact that there is going to be an additional charge for any active cooling products due to the additional performance verification that will be done. Most of the other fees are the standard fees that you've seen already on version 2.1 in previous products. We do want to make a clarification on private label applications, which were actually made available in version 2.1, is that you can include multiple families in the same private label application. Yet there will be a charge for every parent included in the application. Multiple family codes cannot be included in the same OEM application, however. So that is only allowed for private label applications. So that may allow you to prevent you from uploading information that will be similar across multiple private label products into one application, yet there will be separate charges for that, even though they are included in one app. The review timeframes have made a slight change due to the release of these new categories. For review timeframes, keep in mind that DC products may take up to 12 business days for the initial review. And for actively cooled products, that may take up to 14 days for its initial review. That is different from your standard single product or family grouping application and does not include lamps. So those lamps products will actually fall under the single product or family grouping scenario that you submit under. Yet DC products and actively cooled products will have a longer review period. Please keep that in mind during your submissions. We also have a new type of request that is available. In the event you want to delist any products or remove them from the QPL, we do have a means of doing that now on the HORT program. In order to find information on that and how you do that, you can go to the horticulture section and select the delisting request section. There, you will find the application form required for those delisting requests and also any additional information that is required. Note that this is a no charge request that can be made at any time to delist products from the QPL. Delisting requests are reviewed and completed in the same time frame as the initial review for product updates and update applications. These do not undergo a comprehensive review, so these products will be delisted after initial review completion in that same time frame. Also, we want to talk about some brand name consistency. With our new QPL, you have the ability to sort Hort products based on brand. What we've seen is that brand names have been submitted inconsistently by some manufacturers. Examples are extra spaces or punctuation. You may include ink at the end of a brand for some brands and not others, even though they're meant to be the same brand. And so what we recommend is, in order to optimize the search criteria in the QPL for different users who are trying to identify your products, we encourage that manufacturers use the same nomenclature for repetitive brand names. So if you want to use ink period across all your brand names, because if there's a distinction in punctuation, that can result in a different filterable selection in our QPL filters. If you go on the QPL now and you notice that there has been some inconsistency with your brand names, you can submit an update application to change, modify your brand names to make them more consistent. And that is a no-charge application. So keep that in mind for future applications and as you review your horticulture listings that are already listed. Next slide. All right. Well, at this point in time, we'd like to have you guys go ahead, if you haven't already, and submit questions in the question and answer panel. As we stated before, this webinar will be recorded and posted on the DLC website shortly after this webinar has concluded. But please go ahead and submit any questions in the question and answer panel. If you determine that there are some questions that may come to mind after we've gotten off this webinar, you can always email us any of your questions on applications or any general inquiries to the horticulture@DesignLights email address shown here. Okay. All right. All right. Please go ahead and submit any questions you may have in the question and answer panel. All right. Okay.
And also just to remind everyone on the webinar, we will be posting the slides to the website after this presentation, and as well as the recording.
Correct. I guess just as a reminder, version 2.1 offers more eligibility to new categories and does not necessarily override any of the version 2.1 requirements. There are additional special considerations and requirements for these new categories, but please ensure during your submissions that you take a look at not only the version 2.1 information, but any requirement information that was supplied for version 2.1. All right.
Yeah, and then also just another note that we know these types of products can be a little more complex than your typical horticultural lighting product, with especially actively cooled or the certain types of DC products. So if you have any specific questions on how the template should be filled out, or if your testing plan is appropriate or not, feel free to email us and we'll get back to you very quickly to make sure that you can get your submission submitted as soon as possible and as accurately as possible.
Absolutely. Yes, and just a reminder as well, we've talked about a couple of tools such as the cabling loss calculator and the power source test report. And while we know that all of us love to use Excel and generate our own tools at times for generating this information, but we encourage you to use the tools that are available from the DLC, such as the fluid inlet temperature table. If you supply another Excel tool that is not the DLC tool that has been supplied, our reviewers will have to ask you to submit the tool that has been supplied. So please utilize the tools that we've developed And if you have any questions or suggestions on how to make those tools better, please feel free to email us and we will look to investigate any modifications to those tools to make it easier for you to submit and easier for you to understand the usage of those tools. Okay. All right. Well, we don't have many questions coming into the question and answer, which must mean a great thing. I guess that means that Casey Holland, our technical manager, who reviewed a lot of this information in a previous webinar, was very detailed with his explanation. And hopefully we've done a good job in presenting to you guys today some of the changes that will be affected in the application process for these new version 2.1 products. We're looking forward to your application submissions and getting those through based on our published timelines. And feel free once again to reach out to Horticulture at Design Lights with any questions or concerns, or if you need any guidance regarding some of these new application types. All right. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, everyone. We look forward to your applications and hearing from you if need be on our horticulture email. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you all.